So occasionally I'll be browsing Amazon and I'll kind of look on the sidebar where they have recommendations around things to buy. And because I'll be looking around for different accessories or even games at the time for things like the Nintendo 64 or the Game Boy Advance, it'll suggest games to me that I look at and I know they're fake games or counterfeit reproduction cartridges. But a lot of times they're kind of presented as the actual game, like an authentic copy of Mario 64 as an example. And I've seen it so much online that I figured, hey, why don't we just go ahead and order some of these fake games off of Amazon for these different Nintendo systems, a couple of which I ordered are obviously fake. They're those compilation cartridges because I genuinely want to just take a look at them and try them on these systems here. And the other two are ones that are kind of attempted at least to be passed off as legit copies of these games. I figured we would open them up and kind of go over what you can look for when you're looking to buy these. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So first of all, let's talk about the different games that I picked up. Like I said, two of which are kind of being passed off as authentic, where they don't have anything about them being reproduction cartridges or copies of the game in the description. I'm not sure if that's just because of Amazon and they're like trying to get around, oh, if we put up bootleg copies of games from Nintendo, they may try to have some sort of takedown order be issued. And the other two are as obvious as it gets. I mean, one of these is just a purple Super Nintendo cartridge. So first, let's start with the most egregious game that is consistently being copied and have bootlegs put up, and that has to do with the Pokemon series, mostly on the Game Boy Advance. And I see these everywhere. This one is a copy or a Game Box card comp US English version. So there we have it. This is not an authentic copy of Pokemon Ruby, and a lot of times you'll see these at very good prices. This one I think was like $15 or $16 prime shipped, so it showed up in 2 days. So you kind of get the idea of, oh wow, this is 15 bucks, it gets me very quickly. But if I look on eBay, I mean, this game is significantly more expensive there. However, those are authentic copies. Now, the problem we're running into with specifically these Pokemon games is there's been a lot of effort put into these to, at like a quick glance, to appear like it is the real thing. This is an authentic copy. But the more you look around it and compare it maybe to an original, which I unfortunately don't have an original copy of Pokemon Ruby version here right now to put it next to, it becomes pretty obvious. Now with it being opened here, we can see the board itself. We have like a glob top here that's usually covering a circuit, and these are pretty commonplace, specifically in a lot of these reproduction cartridges. What's funny is they even put Nintendo here. I don't know if that's the correct font or anything, and that's one of the things that people would do to try to figure out if it was a fake copy is you could kind of look through this bottom part here because it's translucent and see if that Nintendo logo was printed on the board. I feel like they started to figure out, okay, people are looking for that. Let's go ahead and just kind of print Nintendo's logo, which again, I don't think Nintendo's gonna be too happy to hear about that one. But the other obvious thing here is Pokemon Ruby version needs a battery for its game clock, if I'm not mistaken, and this does not have a battery. And what I noticed this runs, these different reproduction carts of these Game Boy Advance Pokemon games will run into, is corrupted data. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the clock function being an issue with this, but you certainly want to get this guy apart and get a good look around the board itself. What I'll do very quickly is there are images of the authentic version of this cartridge online. I'll just kind of go ahead and put an image of this one next to an authentic. I still think the easiest way to tell is if it appears to be too good to be true, especially when it comes down to its pricing. You might find all 5 of the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games and it's like 50 bucks. And they all come in these clear plastic cases. Like I said, if it appears to be too good to be true, it probably is. But I mean, you can see here, if I just start it up on the Game Boy Advance, I mean, it's gonna start up just like a regular copy of Pokemon Ruby. So unfortunately, it's not easy to spot by trying it out. It's not easy to spot by just kind of looking at it from the outside. You really do have to open it up and get a good look at the inside. Now, the other game I ordered was Mario Kart 64. And this was interesting because back in the day, this is like 10 years ago, I think, reproduction cartridges for the Super Nintendo were very popular. They're still kind of popular now because it's fun to be able to get a copy of a game that never released in your region in a specific language that you can play on actual hardware by having the cartridges. It's just fun to collect. It became more of an issue when people were trying to pass off expensive games by making reproduction cartridges of them. Now, Mario Kart 64 isn't necessarily an expensive game, so it's very odd to me that they are doing this. I guess just because it's Mario and it's Nintendo and it's popular, so they can cycle through, I'm sure, many of these on Amazon. This was listed just as a regular copy of Mario Kart 64, and when you get it, it's wrapped up in this nice plastic and everything, and it has what looks like Mario Kart 64 game console N64 games USA made in China. So it certainly looks the part initially, but I did notice, just kind of looking at the front, the sticker itself is pretty blurry. It almost looks like they printed it off kind of a lower quality printer, and then they got it laminated and I guess stuck it with some glue, because it looks like it's not even cut out very well around the edges. And in some cases, I've seen these games like right here where it's just kind of sticking up off the edge. So when you see kind of a low quality label like this with the label just kind of peeling up on the side here, I mean, that's an obvious indicator that it's either a replaced label or it's just a fake game like this one. I think it's important if you're going to a convention, for example, or a meetup where you're maybe gonna buy some more high-end games for the 64, the Super Nintendo, or even the Game Boy Advance, it's a good idea to bring like some sort of bit driver where you can open these up. Because a lot of the time, if the person has an authentic copy of a game, they have no problem allowing the game to be open so you can take a look at the board. It's usually an issue when they don't want you to open it. So keep that in mind and make sure you have at least one of these with you when you're going to one of these places where you could be picking up these games. I'll link some down below from Amazon. These are usually things you buy once and you're good for a while. Anyway, with the backing off here, we have the typical metal cage. We do have to remove this. Usually there are screws, by the way, down here, but I guess they didn't have those. But once you open it up, again, it's pretty clear what's going on here, because typically you would not have something like this Altera Max 2 dead center that is designed to make this whole thing work with the Nintendo 64. We have this MX, I believe, what's that, Macronix, which is a standard TSOP chip. This one, I think it's a 52 pin, but it looks to be a 16 megabyte chip. And what they do is they just flash the ROM image itself to this chip, and along with this Altera here, it will basically trick the Nintendo 64 into seeing it as an actual copy of the game and booting up. There are like security chips that you would usually need, and I'm not sure if they have one down here to make this work, but this looks significantly different than an actual retail game like, say, Mario 64. In fact, just taking this apart, I mean, you could spot the difference right away. Where we're using a mask ROM here, we're using a TSOP chip on this one. These would be like newer chips along with this Altera here to make all of this run. This is a pretty standard way that Nintendo is having these 64 games work. All right, now it's time for some of the fun games. These are games that I bought that are obvious that they are not authentic Nintendo games. And most of that has to do with it being like this one, 15 games in one in a translucent yellow shell. And while I don't mind these listings as much because they're not trying to be as deceitful as we'll see with, you know, those reproduction carts of actual games, I don't know if Nintendo would be too happy to know that Mario Kart 1, 2, 3, 1942, Island 3, Battle State, looks like they just have NES games on here as well. So they have all three of the Mario Party games, as well as a bunch of original Nintendo games. Contra's on here, Castlevania 2, Mario Bros 1, 2, and 3. It just says Turtle. I'm assuming that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know, I will say I do like the translucent cartridges like this. I think they look pretty good. Would go along nicely with one of the translucent Nintendo 64 Special Edition systems. We'll of course play it as well, but I was just curious as to what's going on in here exactly. So we have another third-party board inside here. It does look like we have that Altera Max 2. This seems to be the chip of choice for a lot of these reproduction Nintendo 64 cartridges. We have a fairly large chip on this side that I guess would be housing all of the ROMs and different games that they have on here, as well as, I assume, some sort of menu that's going to start up as soon as we turn on the system. Doesn't look like they have any battery or anything here. Some of these games that they make these third-party, these reproduction carts for would have a battery holder here with a battery installed. But yeah, it looks like we mostly just have this fairly large chip right here, and then paired with this Altaira Max 2. All right, so we have the multi-game cartridge for the 64 in the system right now, and it pops up to a pretty basic looking menu. It has Mario Party 1, 2, 3, and then 15 NES games, and it looks like you just kind of cycle through. Hey, there's Turtle. Maybe we should find out what Turtle is right away. So I guess I press start, and it just says NES. Okay. Yeah, I'm not really sure what Turtle is. I thought it was, okay, it is. It's Ninja Turtles. All right. So this is Ninja Turtles from the NES. You can tell because I'm already dead. I don't know how we go back to the main. Oh, look at that. Okay, so I press start, L, R, A, and B, and I have a little menu here to go through. Arkanoid paddle off, DMC on, debug info, load new ROM. You can reset the NES. I guess just an emulator that they have on the cartridge itself, and I'm able to go to the menu here. So if I go to load new ROM, it just takes me back here. I'm gonna just go ahead and reset it, and I guess we'll try some of the other stuff. You know what, let's just go ahead and try to start up one of these Mario Party games. Let's go with Mario Party 2. So it does load up just like how you would expect Mario Party to start. And I'm kind of looking at this now as, I guess, a cartridge people would use if they're really into Mario Party and they don't want to keep taking the cartridges off their shelves. The thing that's weird to me about all of this is how often do we see Nintendo go after so many of these fan projects that are they just exist to try to make something really interesting. And then we see stuff like this. It just exists on Amazon. It's been there for a while. Like I said, I've been seeing it over the past year just pop up consistently in the sidebar where they're selling these games on one cartridge using Nintendo's characters and all of this. And at least from what I've seen, there hasn't been anything from Nintendo pulling them down. So yeah, there's Mario Party 2. No problem, starts up like normal there. I'm not really sure how reliable the save data stuff would be on this, but it's Mario Party. I know you would mostly be collecting coins as you go through these different boards and games and use that outside of the boards, but still, I would be wary of keeping a main file or something on this cartridge. So with all of that stuff out of the way, I want to go over the game that I was very interested when it popped up. And I know sure, it's purple, but like, I mean, it's making some pretty serious claims just immediately on the front label. This is another compilation cartridge with a ton of games on it, way more than the 18 games we just looked at on that 64 cartridge. No, this one says 120 in one, and it appears to be RPG related, so there are a lot of RPGs on here. I mean, I see Seiken Densetsu 2, which is Secret of Mana 3. Then we have the Dragon Ball Z Legend of the Super Saiyan, which is a game that I played a lot back then with a very broken translated patch. Earthbound, Lufia. I mean, the list appears to go on just here. I mean, look, they even have Evo, which is an extremely expensive Super Nintendo game. It also doesn't appear to be painted. Like this, I guess, is just a cartridge that they had 3D printed or just created with a mold. So it's purple, which is nice. You don't have any like paint fumes. I've seen that before where like you'll get a game and it's like actually been spray painted to get that right color. This looks like a printer job here on the label because it's already kind of peeling up. Most likely they just printed this out on a standard inkjet printer and then just laminated it and glued it down. But let's go ahead and open this up and see what's going on inside. Let's see, we have what looks like, yeah, we have a third-party board here. That's interesting. They have like this small little battery up here. Usually we see much larger batteries. I do like the battery holder though. That's always nice to see that because you don't have to worry about soldering a new battery in. If this one fails, you can just pop this one out and then just drop a new one in. But wow, there are quite a few chips going on here. All right, so I went ahead and looked up the chips that were on this board because I was very curious how they're making this happen with 120 games on board here, and it does make some sense. If we look at the chip here, there are two main ones here. These are for the ROMs themselves. It even labels as ROM, whereas at the top, this is a much smaller chip than what's down here. I assume this chip is possibly where the game is kind of sent to when you pick it, and that way it just functions as a normal Super Nintendo reproduction cartridge, as this one appears to be an 8 megabyte chip, and that would make some sense considering some of the RPGs can get even above 4 megabytes if you have like a translation patch applied to it. This one, however, is a fairly large chip. It's 1 gigabit, which means it'd be about 128 megabytes. And that would be enough, yes, to hold 120 games, depending, of course, on how large the games are, but typically you can do things like zip them or compress them, and I mean, I guess it does fit here. Now, they do have this chip here, which once again is very similar to what we saw with the N64. This is the Altera chip. And that most likely just kind of makes all of this work together. We have RAM here, which would be required for Super Nintendo games to have some sort of SRAM where it would kind of detect that. Sometimes if it does not see the SRAM or it's not the correct size, it'll even incorporate anti-piracy measures like Earthbound, which has some, I would say, some very famous anti-piracy measures where it will just end up like wiping you out as you get further into the game and make the enemies very, very difficult. They also have their CIC chip over here, which if I remember correctly is mostly for security and having it boot up correctly. So I will at least give them some credit. This appears to be a pretty high quality reproduction cartridge. I know it has like 120 games on there and all of that, but like the board itself is fairly thick. It's not like cheap or flimsy, and it looks like they use some pretty good chips on board here. I feel like most people who would look into this obviously just want to be able to have all of these games, but there could be some people who own some of these games and they don't necessarily want to just take them out and play them all the time on their Super Nintendo, considering the value of some of those games now. So I guess I do see some value in having some of these compilation cartridges, although I would also say just grab like an EverDrive or something, or an SD to SNES and just do that. So we'll go ahead and try this cartridge out. I thought I had a Super Nintendo here that had HDMI out that would make it easier for video capture, but unfortunately I do not. So we're gonna have to jump ahead a bit here when I get home, and we'll try it out there and then come back here to wrap up. So as soon as you turn the game on, it kicks you to this screen here. We have white text on a green background, so not the most appealing looking menu system here, but I mean, all the games at least appear to be here and in alphabetical order as well. I mean, we can kind of scroll through them, and we have, yeah, we have 120. In fact, it looks like they have Zelda and the Ancient Stone tablets, which that was on the Satellaview, and it was like 4 weeks of Zelda, and they would just update it as they went along. You don't typically see that on these reproduction cartridges. Just making one of these is very difficult in general, but it's kind of cool to see them here. We have Link to the Past, you have Ys 3. Looks like we have Ninja Turtles 4, and let's see, we'll kind of drop back here. A lot of Super, obviously, since there are a lot of Super Nintendo games that had Super in the title. Let's actually go into this one real quick and see what it plays like. We'll just kind of fire up a few of these. Yeah, this is the ROM hack. Okay, so I remember this being done a while ago where somebody was working to move Sonic the Hedgehog over, and we ended up with this really weird port where I think, I'm trying to remember which game it was that they moved over. It wasn't a Sonic game. I think it was like, I think it was Mickey, maybe? There was definitely a game that they basically just took Sonic's like sprite and put it over, and it was terrible, which it doesn't feel like Sonic. It kind of looks like Sonic, obviously, because they use the sprite, but it doesn't play like a Sonic the Hedgehog game. And I'm trying to figure out how to go back to the menu. There's no button combination that I'm pressing now that lets me do that, so I think I just have to hit reset on the system. Yeah, that does kick me back. So we also have, let's see, Aero Fighters. There's Dragon Ball Z. And I was curious which patch it was that they used for this, for the English patch. I hope it's not just like the Japanese ROM that they just dropped on here. Oh, this is Dragon Quest 1 and 2, which in Japan, they had Dragon Quest 1 and 2 put on a single cartridge. It was a really cool release at the time. Of course, didn't show up here in the US, but there's Dragon Ball Z. This should be the Legend of the Super Saiyan game that I played a lot back in the day, like I said, with a kind of a busted translation patch. Eventually, there was a very good translation patch, and I think this is it. I think this is the good one. Yeah, it seems to read like the broken translation patch that I used for the longest time was like text was all messed up in it, and this looks right. Let me see. We'll go in here. We'll do
Kamehameha, and then we'll get Piccolo just to kind of pick a card here. And this was a game in Japan where you would pick cards, and it was kind of the evolution of several Famicom Dragon Ball Z games they had. They were RPGs, they were very similar. But this was actually, I thought, a pretty fun game. I know it wasn't everyone's favorite Dragon Ball Z game, but I don't know, I got a kick out of this one. And maybe it was because it was like kind of like an RPG Dragon Ball Z game, which wasn't common back then. We had a lot of like fighting games. It was like what we had, Super Butoden, and then I think we had 3 of those. And then we had Hyper Dimensions. I don't think this is ever going to make a return. Like, I do not see, like, Bandai or someone going, oh, wow, we should get that Dragon Ball Z RPG and bring it up. But I think it'll be pretty fun to see that, just for, like, nostalgia's sake overall. Actually, that's Goku's. So if you pick Goku's, like, training symbol at the time, he'll just attack everyone. It's his favorite card. So you want to do that, and then you can try to take out the stronger yellow Cybermen here. And they'll actually go through, and they'll do some fighting and stuff, and it changes based on their power levels, which you can look at. I thought that was the coolest thing back in the day, is there were power levels in the menus at different times in the series, and you could be like, oh, look, Goku's power level is like 300 and some odd thousand. I knew it. That mostly came from arguing on like GeoCities around power levels. Power level arguing back in the day for Dragon Ball Z was a big deal. So here's Earthbound, and it seems to play fine, but I remember with Earthbound, when it came to like the anti-piracy measures, it wouldn't tell you were on like a counterfeit cartridge immediately. It would basically let you play through a good chunk of the game, and then eventually all the enemies would just become very, very hard to the point where you couldn't progress any further. And I think the idea, rather than just immediately tell you, oh, this, go ahead and return this cartridge, it figured you were probably being malicious and trying to steal the game. So they wanted to waste like a solid 10 hours of your time. I guess it was a creative way to deal with people who were trying to bootleg the game. But I guess if you were someone who legitimately bought it from someone thinking it was real, yeah, it probably wasn't fun to get 10 hours in and then go on Game FAQs or Game Winners back in the day, figure out what's going on, and they say, oh, well, you kind of have a fake version of the game. One game that I know has immediate like anti-piracy messaging, so when you turn it on, it won't let you, is Super Metroid, and I believe it detects the amount of SRAM that you have. I don't see that game on this list, however, so unfortunately, I can't really test that method just to see if it'll detect an incorrect amount of SRAM, but for the most part, the games that I'm trying right now do appear to all work. So, I mean, it's not a bad multi-cartridge overall to pick up if you're just looking to basically leave one cartridge in your system at all times, not really have to take it out. Although I guess being able to play Ancient Stone tablets is kind of cool as well.
And that's going to do it here for fake Nintendo games on Amazon, and there are quite a few of them. I know the compilation cartridges are pretty obvious that they're not real, but I do see a lot of these Pokemon games. I see Zelda, I see Mario 64, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers. The list goes on when it comes to some of these fake games. So you do want to be mindful of that when you're shopping on Amazon. Some people may not care because they do still work, but I know there are also a lot of people who think that they are getting an authentic copy of the game, and they're just not. So my recommendation would be, if it's too good to be true like this Pokemon game, it probably is. And for some of these other 64 games like this Mario Kart 64, they'll be really easy to tell in person based on the label. Maybe see if you can shop around a bit more online for places like eBay that have actual pictures of the item and even request a look inside of the cartridge, or see if you can find your way to conventions or local retro game stores if they're around. I know they're getting harder and harder to find, but it's getting harder and harder to tell some of these apart unless it's right in front of you. But let me know what you guys think about these down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.